I survived a shipwreck, but what truly killed me was the article Olivia published 2 days later. My name is Ryan Hartman. I'm 45 years old, founder and former CEO of Orion Dynamics, a tech company once ranked among the top 100 fastest-growing businesses in America. 3 months ago, I was giving a TEDx talk on resilience, leadership, and loyalty. Sitting front row was Olivia, my wife of 11 years and my co-founder. Next to her was Brandon, my ambitious young executive assistant, someone I trusted like a younger brother. Today, I stand barefoot in the waiting lounge at LAX, sea salt still crusted in my hair, my limbs trembling with exhaustion, looking like a ghost who somehow crawled back from the grave. I had drifted onto a deserted island after our yacht vacation turned into disaster off the coast of Fiji. A storm had hit without warning. While others were rescued by a patrol boat, I, due to some cruel error, was left behind, clinging to a life raft, swallowed by the ocean. On that island, I survived on rainwater and charred fish. Each day was a fight for survival, but what truly kept me alive wasn't food. It was hope. Hope of returning, hope of seeing Olivia's tearful smile, hope that everything would go back to the way it was. I had envisioned that moment countless times, but nothing could have prepared me for the nightmare that awaited me instead. At the rescue station, I borrowed a phone and dialed Olivia's number. No answer. I called my office. A stranger picked up, polite but distant. "I'm sorry, you have the wrong number." Confused, I opened my email on a borrowed laptop. Access denied. I checked my bank accounts, completely wiped out. My heart pounded. I sank into the plastic airport seat, trying to breathe, trying to stay calm. I typed Orion Dynamics CEO into the search bar. The first headline hit like a sledgehammer. Brandon Miller, officially named CEO of Orion Dynamics, announces merger with co-founder Olivia Hartman. I froze. In the image, Brandon stood in a sharp gray suit, exuding confidence. Next to him was Olivia, her hand resting casually on his arm, the same woman I nearly died dreaming of. Beneath the headline was a glowing interview. From colleagues to power couple, how Brandon and Olivia are reshaping the tech world together. I couldn't read past the first few lines. My head spun. Olivia hadn't searched for me. She had moved on, and not just privately. She had done it in the spotlight, hand in hand with the man I once mentored, the man who used to bring me coffee and call me the best boss I've ever had. Everything we built, our company, our marriage, our future, was now theirs. And me, I was erased, not just from our accounts, but from our lives. They thought I was dead. They made sure I stayed that way. I had fought to stay alive on that island, fought storms, starvation, loneliness. But nothing, not even the isolation, prepared me for this. Because the real hell didn't start on that island. It started the moment I came home. I walked out of the airport like a man who no longer existed. No wallet, no phone, no one waiting. The golden sun stretched over the Los Angeles skyline, but my heart felt nothing but cold gray. For 30 days on a God-forsaken island, I believed that if I could just make it back to land, everything would be okay. Now I wanted to go back to that island. I wandered, numb and lost. A part of me still clung to the idea that this was all a misunderstanding. Maybe Olivia didn't know I was alive. Maybe someone had lied to her. Maybe there was still a rational explanation. But that illusion shattered the moment I found free Wi-Fi outside a dingy coffee shop near the bus station. I borrowed a stranger's phone, connected to the news. One by one, I opened the articles, the photos, the social media posts Olivia and Brandon had shared, just days after I disappeared. There was no panic, no search, no grief. Instead, she filed emergency legal paperwork declaring me mentally incapacitated. Brandon was appointed interim CEO. Within 2 weeks, the board voted to grant them full control. Bank accounts emptied, company shares transferred, my name erased from press releases, property deeds, and every professional profile. They hadn't just stolen from me, they had erased me. I stared at myself in the grimy bathroom mirror of that coffee shop. My skin was burnt, lips cracked, eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. The man staring back wasn't Ryan Hartman, not the one from 3 weeks ago. I used to believe I was strong, but betrayal doesn't care how strong you are. I dialed Olivia's number again, straight to voicemail. I tried Brandon's. Disconnected. I checked my old phone account. It was still active, but I had no device, no identification. Legally, I couldn't even prove I was me. I had become a ghost in my own life. Crossed out like a typo no one wanted to remember. That's when I remembered Michael Reese, my closest friend since college, one of California's top litigation attorneys. He had never liked Olivia, always warned me something felt off. I laughed it off, told him he was paranoid. Turns out he saw everything I didn't. I borrowed the phone again and dialed the only number still burned into memory, Michael's. He picked up after 2 rings. "Ryan?" His voice cracked. "Jesus, where the hell are you?" I swallowed hard. "I need help, Mike. I've got nothing, no home, no money, no identity. I need a place to stay. And I need a lawyer." No hesitation. "Get to my house. Right now. Doors open." When I arrived, Michael just stood there for a moment, stunned. Then he pulled me into a firm hug and didn't say a word. We sat at his kitchen table, soft lights overhead, a fresh pot of coffee between us. I told him everything, from the storm that swept me away, the days of hopelessness, to the moment I realized the people I trusted most had written me off like a dead man. He listened silently, his jaw tightening with every word. When I finished, he stood, poured 2 fresh cups of coffee and said, calm and cold, "We're going to burn them to the ground, legally." I spent the night at Michael's house. The bed was soft, too soft. No crashing waves, no howling winds, no insects crawling in the dark. And yet I couldn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying every detail over and over again. Olivia's face in that news article. Her hand wrapped around Brandon's arm like the past meant nothing. And me, her husband, the man who pulled her out of bankruptcy a decade ago, lying here with no name, no home, and not a single cent to my name. In the morning, Michael made coffee, black, no sugar. He slid a mug across the table, sat down across from me, and said, "Now tell me everything, every detail. I need the full picture starting from the moment you stepped onto that yacht." I took a long breath and began. I told him about the vacation Olivia had insisted on, a reward for both of us after Orion secured its highest valuation yet. She had chosen the destination, the dates, the charter company. Brandon wasn't supposed to come. He'd said he needed to stay behind to handle work. But at the last minute he showed up, claiming he wanted to surprise us. I described the storm that came out of nowhere. The morning I woke up on a life raft, alone, bruised and bleeding, no emergency signal, no radio, just endless ocean. Michael frowned. "Do you think they left you behind on purpose?" I looked down at my coffee. I didn't want to believe it. But why else would Olivia not even file a missing persons report? Why did she hold a press conference and sign over my company within days? Michael didn't answer. He simply stood, opened his laptop, and began typing. "I'm requesting emergency account holds and document audits. I need every piece of information you remember. Joint assets, emails, documents you signed, anything suspicious in the last 6 months." We spent the morning digging. I sat in the living room trying to recall every red flag I had ignored, like the time Olivia asked me to sign a few restructuring papers without reading them, or the time Brandon said he needed temporary admin access to our financial dashboards to run a quarterly audit. At the time, they sounded like normal business moves. Now they felt like rehearsed traps. That afternoon, Michael called someone in. Her name was Laura, a corporate litigation specialist with years of experience in financial fraud. She sat across from me, listening to the whole story. Her face stayed neutral, but her eyes were sharp. After I finished, she leaned forward and said, "If you were declared incapacitated without medical evidence, that's fraudulent. If your signature was forged, it could rise to criminal liability. I looked at Michael. He nodded. Do you want to pursue this, Ryan? I didn't answer right away. I looked out the window. The sun was beginning to set, painting orange streaks across the sky. A lone crow landed on the fence, cawing harshly. The world outside looked calm, but inside me, a storm was gathering. I used to believe in Olivia more than I believed in myself, I said softly. I thought as long as she was beside me, we could survive anything, but she's the one who pushed me off the edge. Michael said nothing. He just let me speak. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for the truth and for justice. He gave a single nod. Then we start today. The following days passed like a surreal blur. Michael and I barely left his home office. Old contracts, financial statements, archived emails, all stacked in neat piles across the table. Michael called it a reputation recovery campaign. I had a different name for it, the only thing keeping me sane. We found the first real lead on day 3. An email from Brandon dated 6 months ago, titled Optimizing Share Allocation. In it, he asked me to sign a set of temporary documents to streamline investor onboarding. I remembered that day. Olivia stood behind me as I signed, assuring me just procedural stuff, nothing important. But when Laura, our legal expert, reviewed the files, her expression turned cold. These aren't temporary forms, she said. They're binding voting rights transfers. Unless you can prove coercion or fraud, they can use this to legitimize the entire power grab. I stared at the signature at the bottom. It looked like mine. The font, the strokes, but I had no memory of ever signing such a document knowingly. Michael leaned over. I've seen your real signature enough times. This one's been lifted, probably copied from an older contract. I'll have it analyzed by a handwriting specialist. We kept digging. Then came the second blow. A secret bank account under Olivia's name opened just 3 days after I was declared missing. It had received large transfers from Orion's treasury, funneled through a fake vendor company Brandon had set up. No employees, no office, just a shell. My anger no longer burned hot. It was slow, cold, surgical. I wasn't the broken man sobbing in the airport anymore. I flipped through each document now with unnerving clarity, like I was dissecting a tumor from a once healthy body. You're changing, Michael said one night as we combed through records. Good or bad? I asked. Both, he smirked. Good, because you're thinking clearly now. Bad, because I barely recognize you. I didn't respond. He wasn't wrong, but I knew the man I used to be, the trusting, loyal version of Ryan, was gone, and maybe that wasn't a bad thing. On the 5th day, a phone call shifted everything. Laura reached out to a former accountant at Orion, one who had been abruptly fired after Olivia took control. We set up a meeting at a quiet cafe on the west side of the city. She arrived holding a folder and a flash drive. These, she said, sliding them across the table, are copies I kept. I had a feeling something was wrong. Inside were flagged transaction records and a full system backup from the company's financial database, the last one before her termination. Michael asked gently, "Are you certain these signatures were forged?" "I'm positive," she replied. "I worked with Ryan for years. That's not his natural hand. This one's copy-pasted from a prior authorization form." I didn't know what to say, other than 2 words, "Thank you." She smiled a bit nervously. "I always respected you. I just hope justice finds its way this time." That night, Michael opened a bottle of wine. He poured 2 glasses and slid one toward me. "We're ready to file," he said. "Financial fraud, forged documents, unlawful seizure of corporate assets. This isn't just civil court material anymore. We might be looking at criminal charges." I lifted my glass, didn't clink it against his, just drank. I didn't need to win overnight. I just needed the truth to come out. And piece by piece, we were getting there. 1 week after I returned from hell, the official lawsuit was filed in county court. Defendants Olivia Hartman and Brandon Miller. Allegations: financial fraud, forgery, unlawful seizure of assets and company shares. I had nothing, no money, no title, but I had evidence. And this time, that was everything. The moment the lawsuit went public, the air around us shifted. Michael's phone rang non-stop. Journalists started circling. A few former employees, silent until now, sent confidential emails revealing the pressure and strange directives they received from Olivia and Brandon during the 2 months I was missing. One assistant who worked under me for 3 years wrote, "I was forced to sign papers legitimizing Brandon's promotion to CEO. When I asked why, Olivia just said, 'Ryan's not coming back.'" That line haunted me for days afterward. Then came the depositions. The first session was between legal teams, Michael representing me. On the other side, just as expected, Olivia had hired a high-profile law firm out of San Francisco, famous for turning gray into white. I saw Olivia for the first time since my return. She walked into the room like nothing had happened. Composed, elegant, cold. Brandon followed, flinching when he saw me, then quickly flashing that familiar smug smile. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. I had already spoken, through the files, the evidence, and the people whose conscience finally outweighed their fear. Michael started with basic questions. The timeline of my disappearance, the decisions made in my absence. Olivia answered smoothly, like she'd rehearsed every word. Then he slid the share transfer agreement across the table. "Who prepared this document?" he asked. She glanced briefly at Brandon before replying, "Our legal department." "Do you have any video, audio, or signed declarations confirming that Ryan consented to this transfer?" Her jaw tensed. I'm not sure. Things were moving fast at the time." Michael said nothing. He simply turned the page, revealing a professional handwriting analysis, concluding that my signature had been digitally copied from a previous contract. Brandon shifted uncomfortably in his chair. For the first time, I saw Olivia's calm facade start to crack. Over the next few weeks, we gathered more testimony. A senior engineer at Orion stated that admin systems had been manipulated to revoke my access. An HR associate submitted internal emails in which Brandon instructed staff to avoid mentioning Ryan under any circumstances. The pieces were falling into place. The betrayal, once invisible, was now sharply defined, cold, calculated, complete. One night, Michael dropped a new file on the table. "We've cornered them," he said. "But this is just the first phase. They'll push back, hire PR firms, spread misinformation, even intimidate witnesses." I nodded. "I'm ready." He looked me dead in the eye. "Are you ready to hear Olivia lie in court? Are you ready to relive every mistake you ever made? On record, under oath, in public?" I paused, then nodded again. She turned me into a ghost in my own life. Now I'll make sure she has to face the truth. The first court session opened on a gray Monday morning, cold wind sweeping across the courthouse steps. I sat quietly on the plaintiff's bench, wearing a dark suit, gripping an old ballpoint pen Michael had handed me the night before. The pen had no ink. It was just something to hold, so I wouldn't clench my fists into my palms. Across from me, Olivia sat upright, calm, radiating the same poise she always had in magazine interviews. Brandon sat beside her, eyes on his phone, tapping nervously. He didn't dare look at me. The judge entered, a stern, middle-aged woman with calm authority. "This court is now in session," she said, "to determine the legality of the transfer of shares, assets, and executive authority at Orion Dynamics." Michael stood, stepping into the center of the room. "Your Honor," he began, voice firm, "we are not simply here to dispute paperwork. We are here to expose a deliberate, coordinated scheme, engineered by this man's wife and his most trusted subordinate, to rob him of everything he built." We presented our evidence methodically. A handwriting analysis confirming forgery, bank records showing hidden transfers into Olivia's offshore account, internal emails revealing unauthorized access to the company's systems, testimony from a former Orion accountant who had been fired without cause. I watched Olivia begin to blink more often. Brandon's hands started to tremble, but the courtroom truly fell silent when Michael pulled out a small USB. "Your Honor," he said, "our next item is an unedited audio recording, captured from Orion's old internal camera system. It recorded a conversation between defendants Olivia Hartman and Brandon Miller 1 week before Mr. Hartman went missing." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Michael plugged in the USB and hit play. Olivia's voice came through, crisp and unmistakable. "I booked flights for me and 2 others. Ryan's not on the list. If he disappears, that's not my fault." Brandon's voice followed, laughing lightly. "Makes the transfer easier. As long as we have signed documents, we're in the clear." "I'll handle it," Olivia said. "I've lived with him long enough to know how to get a signature without questions." I couldn't breathe. My heart pounded like a war drum. The judge called for the recording to stop. She looked straight at Olivia and Brandon. "Do either of you have an explanation for this conversation?" Olivia opened her mouth, but said nothing. She glanced at her attorney, who now looked down at the table, motionless. Brandon sat frozen, his face pale. Michael stepped forward. "Your Honor, what you just heard is not a misunderstanding. It is premeditated betrayal, a calculated plan to remove a man from his own life during a period of helplessness and survival." The judge nodded, her expression unreadable. "The court will proceed to review the full documentation and assess whether criminal charges are appropriate in addition to the civil suit." Walking out of court that day, I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow. What had I expected? Vindication? Relief? A tear from Olivia? No. What I got was a blank stare from someone who once vowed to love me forever. The woman who used to hold my hand in boardrooms now wouldn't even meet my eyes. Michael placed a hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing." I nodded, but deep down I knew the truth was out, but this war was far from over. 1 week after the first court session, Olivia and Brandon abruptly changed attorneys. No one offered an explanation, but I didn't need one. The audio recording had struck like a dagger through the heart of their plan. Publicly, they kept their composure, but behind the scenes, their foundation was cracking. Michael received an email from their new legal team. "Our clients are open to negotiating a private settlement." I didn't read past the second line. "No," I said, "we're not stopping here." Michael nodded. He understood. This was no longer about me. It was about principle. The trial continued over the next 3 weeks. We submitted more damning evidence. An independent audit confirming deliberate system tampering within Orion. Tech reports tracing unauthorized logins to Brandon's personal laptop. Testimonies from 2 former employees who had been forced out for refusing to validate forged documents. Most notably, the handwriting expert testified in court that my signature had been digitally extracted from an old contract, then superimposed onto fraudulent documents using specialized software. Every witness, every exhibit, hammered away at the polished image Olivia had crafted for herself. I watched her from across the courtroom. She grew quieter with each session. The confident gleam in her eyes dimmed. Her posture slumped. The persona she had built began to unravel. Brandon reacted differently. He fidgeted, twitched. One day, as we left the courtroom, I caught sight of him in the hallway, hands clutching his head, whispering, "I didn't mean for it to go this far." Then came the verdict. The court ruled. The transfer of shares was null and void due to fraud. All wrongfully seized assets must be returned to the plaintiff. Olivia and Brandon were found jointly liable, and the case would proceed to criminal investigation on charges of forgery, breach of trust, and financial misappropriation. No one clapped, no celebration, just silence. And within that silence, I found what I had come for: recognition. Justice doesn't roar, it doesn't seek revenge, it simply stands. I didn't look at Olivia again. She no longer mattered. Brandon was escorted out through the back to avoid reporters, His face was pale, his hands shaking, his career in shambles. I walked down the courthouse steps, into sunlight breaking through thick clouds. Michael walked beside me, his tone softer than I'd ever heard it. "You won," he said. "No," I replied, allowing myself a faint smile. "I survived." A month later, I returned to the Orion office. It had once been my kingdom, then a battlefield. Now it was a blank slate. I didn't keep a single executive who had enabled Olivia. I started fresh with the quiet employees, the ones who had been overlooked, the ones who had integrity. I changed the company's slogan. It used to be "Engineering the Future." Now it read, "Honesty is the most powerful technology." During a team meeting, a young engineer raised his hand and asked, "After everything, why didn't you just sell it and walk away?" I smiled. Because if I walked away, they would still win, not legally, but through damage. I wanted to prove that even after you've been pushed to the bottom, you can stand back up on your own 2 feet. I don't think about Olivia much anymore. Some say she moved abroad, avoiding the press. Others say Brandon filed for personal bankruptcy. I don't care. One late afternoon, I stood on the rooftop of Orion's headquarters. The city lay stretched before me, glowing in the golden light of autumn. Somewhere beneath those streets, I had lost everything. And now I had taken it all back. Not just my company, not just my name, but my self-respect. No one gave that back to me. I took it. I moved out of Michael's house 3 months after the final court ruling. Not because I had forgiven, not because I had forgotten, but because I'd walked far enough to realize I needed to stand on my own. No matter how loyal, no one else's presence can serve as a permanent crutch. I rented a modest apartment on the edge of the city, 2 bedrooms, dark hardwood floors, a balcony facing east. Morning light streamed through the curtains and spilled onto the desk. It wasn't stylish, it wasn't luxurious, but it was quiet. Each morning I brewed coffee and opened the windows. At night I wrote a few lines in a journal. That was it. No more late-night board meetings, no endless email chains, no charts filled with projections and pressure. I had finally learned how to slow down. Of course, there were still nights I woke up at 3 a.m., drenched in sweat. The memories visited like ghosts. Olivia's laugh during that press conference, Brandon's smirk as he signed fake documents, the hollow emptiness of seeing my bank account wiped clean. But now I didn't run. I let them pass. I opened my eyes, and I breathed. I started writing. Not a business memoir or a productivity guide, just a personal journal, a place to record fragments, the first night on the island, the smell of burnt fish, the sound of waves slamming against rock, the courtroom, Michael's expression when I rejected the settlement offer. I didn't write for an audience. I wrote to remind myself I lived through this, and I came out the other side. Michael still visited most weekends. He'd bring cold beer and joke, "You're living like a retired monk." Then we'd sit on the balcony in silence. That kind of silence wasn't awkward. It felt like presence, like company that doesn't need to speak. One rainy evening, after we'd both gone quiet, he asked, "If Olivia called you, would you pick up?" I paused. "No." "Because you hate her?" "No," I said softly, "because there's nothing left to say." Sometimes the clearest answers come in silence. Sometimes forgiveness isn't something you say aloud. Sometimes it's choosing peace for yourself. A few media outlets invited me for interviews. One called it "The Ultimate Story of Betrayal Survival." A documentary producer asked if I'd be the focus of a feature. I declined them all. I didn't want to be a symbol. I didn't want to be the man who was betrayed. I'm Ryan. That's enough. I didn't need public validation. I just needed to wake up every morning and still recognize myself. The following summer, I went back to the island, not to find anything, but to let something go. It was a 7-day trip. I told no one, not even Michael. I brought only a small backpack, a journal, a flint kit, and an old film camera. I didn't want phone pictures or GPS markers. I wanted something slower, more honest. The man who saved me, an old Fijian fisherman, was still there, older now, eyes dimmer, but when he shook my hand, his grip was steady. "I didn't think you'd come back," he said. "Neither did I replied. "But there are some places we need to return to, just to say goodbye." The island looked the same, wind-bent trees, sharp coral rocks, everything untouched. Except me. I found the place I'd once built a shelter, dug into the dirt where I had buried a plastic container. Inside, a rusted knife, old rope, a torn cloth, and a scrap of paper smeared with charcoal. "If I survive, remember, never give everything to someone else." I read the words 3 times, then lit them on fire. I watched the ashes drift into the sea and disappear. I didn't forgive Olivia, but I forgave myself, for being blind, for loving too hard, for staying too long, for believing someone would never harm me just because I wouldn't harm them. On the 4th day, I rebuilt a simple shelter, lit a fire, sat beside it at dusk. The sky turned orange, the waves whispered against the shore. No phone, no emails, no title to defend. I wasn't a CEO, I wasn't a survivor, I wasn't anyone's husband or victim. I was just me. I set my camera on a tripod, hit the timer, walked into the frame, hands in my pockets, looked directly at the lens, and smiled, just slightly. That photo was the only thing I brought home. I printed it, framed it, hung it in my home office. Below it, I wrote, "I was erased from my own life, but I wrote it back, by hand." I don't know what lies ahead, and for once, I don't need to, because now I'm strong enough to face it, whatever it is. Silence, loss, or maybe love, if it ever comes again. Not everyone who falls gets to come back, but if you do, live like it means something.